Hi, everybody. I'm Sunny from Mozilla.
And
I have mine on too.
oh, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say it's Cheryl. I'm in North Carolina. Nice to be here with everybody.
And Jonathan, if you'd like to just say hello quickly, I'll do another introduction. Let's just do a sound check quickly. If you introduce yourself, then I'll do a formal introduction.
You bet. Hi, it's Jonathan Finkelstein. I'm here in New York, and it's great to be here.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, thank you for your patience. We're starting about 10 minutes late, but I'm delighted. We have an excellent panel to explore the topic of digital badges and learning this evening. We have a pretty small group here today, but that's to be expected because a large number of the participants in this open course are participating from around the world. I got a number of emails in the last day telling me that they'd love to attend, but they're just not quite committed enough to get up at 3 a.m. in order to do so. So they'll probably be joining us or checking this out later in the recording. But our focus today, as I said, is digital badges and learning, and that's one of the options for earning a badge. We have a badge in this open course, and we have a number of participants or followers or others that have picked up on this action online for this MOOC who can do a much better job sharing about some of the promising things that are happening with digital badges and learning than I could. What this presentation was originally intended to be was my taking you on a little tour behind the scenes of how we set up the badging system for the course, and then to talk a little bit more broadly about digital badges and learning. When I noticed that we had some other people who were experts in this area and have done some great things with regard to digital badges, I thought it'd be great for us to replace that initial presentation with this panel discussion. I will be doing a recording, a video recording, that'll take you on a little behind the scenes tour of how we have things set up, and I'll make that available on the Beyond Letter Grades website at a later time. Briefly, I'll serve as the moderator for our panel today. My name is Bernard Bull. I'm an Assistant Vice President of Academics at Concordia University, Wisconsin, and a Professor of Educational Design and Technology. My area of research and scholarship has to do with educational innovation and entrepreneurship. So I spend a lot of time visiting learning organizations that are outside the box, interacting with education startups and so forth, and learning about what's happening out there, and then bringing it back to some of the more traditional learning organizations. And that's really what was the impetus for this current course on learning beyond letter grades. The badges are one of several different ways in which we're looking at enhancements or alternatives to a letter grade system. And so that's going to be our focus for tonight. I did send a little note to the panelists in advance that shared three simple questions that we'll use to sort of divide our time together. Well, the first one is I'll give each panelist a chance to introduce themselves. I do have bios that were made available to you on the Learning Beyond Letter Grades website that you can read, but I'll give each panelist an opportunity to introduce themselves briefly as well, highlighting whatever they choose. And after that, we'll spend just a few minutes on that. After that, we're going to spend a large chunk of the time looking at the question, what are the possibilities for digital badges and learning? And I've given that as a prompt for each of the panelists. They'll have a chance to each answer that question, and then we'll do a little bit of Q&A. And then finally, what are some good starting points for individuals or organizations that are interested in exploring digital badges and learning? Once more, we'll give the panelists a chance to respond to that question, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. We'll use the remaining time for any other questions that the group may have. So that's our plan for tonight. Again, thank you so much to our panelists, Cheryl Grant, Jonathan Finkelstein, and Sunny Lee for joining us tonight. So let's go ahead and get started with the first part, a brief introduction. Cheryl, if you don't mind, could you start us out and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Bernard. I'm the Director of Social Networking for the Haystack MacArthur Foundation Badges for Lifelong Learning competition. We run competitions every year under Digital Media and Learning Competition, and we partnered with Mozilla in 2011, and we ran a competition where, as part of the Badges for Lifelong Learning initiative, we wanted to basically seed the ecosystem, the badge ecosystem, with really high quality learning content. So we ran a competition, and Jonathan is actually one of our grantees. for a couple different projects. And Sunny and I worked very closely together with the grantees who won. And the idea was that we wanted to bring people, developers. Oh, Beth is saying love Haystack. Thank you, Beth. We wanted to have developers and technologists come forward and design badge systems for these 30 different organizations that had learning content. So some of those projects included NASA, Intel, Microsoft, Disney, 4-H, University of California, San Diego. So we funded them. They were at the beginning of their grant cycle last year in 2012, and they began building. They had a grant year to get to a certain point in their development. So a lot of them have just deployed or implementing, or they're about to start launching their badge systems into the wild. Some of them came in with already had been badging, and they used the grant funding to push what they were doing farther. And one of the requirements of the grants was that they make their badge systems OBI compliant. And Sunny can talk a little bit more about that. But what that meant is that those badges need to be living out in the wild. They need to be portable and information rich and transparent, and contain a lot of the information that make badges so different than other kinds of assessment. So I'll just end with that. I probably should just mention, since Beth was doing a shout out for Haystack, I'll end that in terms of the badges, but I'll just say that Haystack is a organization that stands for Humanities, Arts, Science, Technology, Alliance, and Collaboratory. So we work at the very fringes and the very edge, and often the very tipping point of new kinds of learning technology. We look at the way people are already using different tools and bring in the humanities aspect. So Bernard, your class is actually very Haystack in its orientation by bringing in sort of a historical look at way things have been done and comparing it to some of the new things that are happening. So wonderful class, and I'm glad to be part of this panel.
Thank you. I follow Haystack pretty closely myself. It's inspired a lot of my own thinking. Sunny, would you please take us through a brief introduction?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. Sorry, just making sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Sunny Lee, the product manager at for Open Badges. I work for an organization called Mozilla, which you might be familiar with. We're best known for our Firefox browser, but we also do a lot of other cool things, Open Badges being one of them. Cheryl briefly touched upon what we do, but fundamentally what we're trying to do is making recognition systems work like the web. And that sounds kind of abstract, but what I basically mean is fundamental to our work at Open Badges is to promote an open standard. There are various recognition systems out there, various credentialing models out there, from higher ed institutions, bachelor degrees, various certification programs, tech training programs, to increasingly we're seeing more and more digital badges joining the fray of trying to recognize learning happening in various ways. But a lot of these systems are siloed off. So from the perspective of a learner who has, for instance, a bachelor's degree from their higher ed institution and a project management certificate from an organization and digital badges from an online learning course, all these credentials or all these recognition systems that represent who they are, what they've learned, are all in their separate cloistered environments. And we want to break down these siloed barriers and have these recognition systems work in a more interoperable way. So first and foremost, we are shepherds of an Open Badges standard, intending to make these various recognition systems communicate in a common language. So we have defined the badge standard in what we're calling the metadata specification. Cheryl touched upon it. We want this. The intent is to. We think that there's an opportunity to make a credential be more than just a paper certificate. By embedding key pieces of information inside of it, we think that that badge, that digital badge, can more clearly communicate and capture what went into the learning and the earning of that badge. So we've defined those pieces of information, which include things like who issued this badge, to whom was it issued, what was the criteria that went into the earning of this badge. There's also opportunity to link evidence associated with the earning of this badge, etc. So with the badge standard at the foundation, we've also developed we've kind of laid down the technical infrastructure to help support that badge information to easily be shareable and transferable and shareable across the web. So we've kind of laid down the basic technical infrastructure that includes a set of what we call APIs, which basically enables badge information to easily transfer from place to place. And we also have built a tool called the Backpack that enables badge earners to be able to see all the badges that they've earned across various places in one place, so that they can see kind of all the kind of recognition pieces that they've garnered all in one place, manage them, and figure out how they want to showcase those, display those out to the world. So that's kind of the work that we do, and I work very closely with Cheryl as part of the digital media learning competition. We worked closely with the grantees to help them align their badge systems with our open standard and integrate with their APIs. And through that effort, I've also had the pleasure of working with the folks at Credly Badge Stack, who's here with us today, Jonathan Finkelstein, I think I see John Walber as well. And with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Bernard.
Thank you. Jonathan, your turn.
Hi, everyone, and nice to hear your voices, Cheryl and Sunny, as well. And speaking of voices, I hope you can hear mine even just a touch louder than the one coming over the PA system. My apologies. So I'm Jonathan Finkelstein, and I come to the space around digital badges and credentials through the lens of a lot of years doing kind of off-the-radar kinds of learning, or at least learning that's off-the-radar traditional assessment systems. We've always done online conferences, events, online debate programs, 3D Worlds learning with kids across New York City, all sorts of things that don't necessarily lend themselves directly to traditional grading systems. And over the last several years, people started to ask, is there a way I can maybe get some credit for the work that we're doing in these really interesting online events? I'm presenting, I'm volunteering, I'm giving my time. Something you can maybe give to me that I can show my supervisor or my boss or put on my resume. And so we started to think about ways to acknowledge the kind of unique learning that was representing the way people are spending their learning time today, these days. And so, in fact, if you look at this nice little chart here that comes out of a report from the Life Center at the University of Washington and Stanford University and SRA International, it represents what we already know about learning, which is that much of it happens outside of the classroom. We get some of our best inspiration sometimes. We get some of our I'm sorry, it's really hard to hear myself think with these. I couldn't find a quieter place. My apologies. But a lot of the learning we do happens outside of these traditional settings. And these little black dots here, once you get into undergrad and grad and work, are the dwindling amount of time we spend in formal settings. And picking up on what Sunny and Cheryl said, I look at the world through this lens of, yeah, we're always achieving things. The achievements that are most interesting to me are often the ones that somebody else can validate, somebody can verify on your behalf. And that's pretty much any time you interact with web resources, with other people, in formal and informal settings, there are people who are in a position to gauge your accomplishment against a particular standard. Those standards can vary from place to place, but they exist all over the place, whether they're extracurricular activities while you're in school, or on-the-job training that you do while you're in a workplace setting, or maybe you're taking proctored exams towards a certification. And then there are awards and things that you get from your peers and from colleagues as you interact in online communities and face-to-face communities. And so all of these kind of come together, as Sunny was explaining, through the lens of these are the kinds of achievements we want people to get credit for. And I'll just sort of wrap up my brief introduction to say that what we've done is we're working on putting out free and open source tools that tie to this emerging open badge standard that is really giving us all a way of having common conversations and kind of connecting the nerve endings between different points in the achievement continuum. And so these are the way that we're starting to see those achievements take shape, and we can come back to this spectrum as we jump into things in a moment. But I think in any given setting, sometimes some of these achievements can be far more important than others, even if they're higher up on the spectrum in terms of what they enable you to do. Something that was given to you to commemorate your presence or your participation might have seemed like a small accomplishment at the time, but it becomes the point which launches you into a whole new career, a whole new topic, a whole new area, and therefore it takes on a whole new meaning as you develop your profession or your interests. So I'll turn it back to Bernard, and I'm glad we're all chatting about this today.
Well, thank you. So as everyone can tell, we have a wonderfully gifted panel that has diverse experiences that they're bringing to the conversation. So the first question that I have posed, and we only have a couple of them, is a very broad one. But for those who have gone through a little bit of the course, they may know sort of where this is coming from. But the question that we're posing next, and I'll just open it up to the whole panel in a moment, is the question, what are the possibilities? As some of you may recall from the introductory videos and even in the Affordances and Limitations badge, there's an introductory video that talks about this idea of what are the possibilities. And I gave the example of a Futures in Education event that I was at, where there was a panel talking about futures in education, and one person in the audience asked the question, well, where do I start? This is all very exciting stuff, but where do I start with it? And one of the panelists suggested the first step is to get informed about the possibilities. So the question that I'd like to share with our panel and invite our panel to respond to is, what are some of the possibilities that you're seeing for digital badges and learning? Are there some promising practices that you're seeing? What are the possibilities for assessments? What sort of assessment possibilities might badges contribute to the larger, our larger endeavor of education today?
I can take a first stab at that, and I'm sure Jonathan and Cheryl have a lot more to add. I think the possibilities of badges, there are lots of possibilities of badges. A lot of times, for instance, I have a master in information sciences. So I jokingly, my colleagues from my graduate program, we all jokingly say we're masters of information, but that really, when I put that on my resume, I'm not sure what it really communicates. And I have to say, many of my colleagues and I, while we have the same big degree of a master's, we have very divergent skills. Some of my classmates from my master's degree program are heavily technical. They know how to do code. They know all the different coding languages. Some of my colleagues are much more interested in user experience design. Some are more interested in the implications of information policy. What we came out with is very, very different, yet we all carry the same degree. We think that maybe badges can help break that huge degree down to its more granular parts so that it can more effectively communicate what I actually know how to do. So there's that level of granularity that we think can help break a large degree down into its more component pieces to more clearly communicate and capture and signal what a person actually knows how to do and what they know. We think that that's definitely a great opportunity for badges. We're also seeing different models of assessment. Traditionally, traditional assessment has been, somebody of an authority figure grading a student and then based on some certain set of rubrics. But in a lot of the digital badging systems out there, we're seeing more kind of outside of the box thinking with regards to assessment, including peer-to-peer assessment. We think that those hold a lot of currency. A lot of times we point to the example of, for instance, Stack Overflow, which has a badging system, although they're not aligned with the Open Badges standard quite yet. Their badge system is a distributed peer-to-peer assessment model in which, just to back up a little bit, Stack Overflow is a site, it's basically a coding community where if you're coding a website or something like that, and you run up against a bug and you can't figure out what to do next, you can go to Stack Overflow and post a question describing the issue that you're encountering, and then kind of tap the crowd to get your answers. And it's a pretty thriving community, and there is a badge system that rolls up into a reputation score that holds a lot of value. And for instance, the reputation for a lot of those folks that participate in Stack Overflow has grown such that they have a career component of it, enabling recruiters to kind of tap into look at the reputation scores to kind of recruit coders and programmers, etc. So this is a reputation system in addition to a badging system that rolls up into a reputation system that helps people figure out not just hard skills, like this person definitely knows knows HTML, this person definitely knows JavaScript, but they also have badges that are that represent and capture more soft skills, like this person is this person provides really solid comprehensive answers. This person is a good communicator. So the badge systems are capturing both hard skills as well as soft skills, which is really interesting. And it's also done on a peer-to-peer level. I want to hand it off to Cheryl or Jonathan to see if they have anything further to add to that.
I would this is Cheryl, to build on what Sunny was saying. One of the things that Kathy Davidson and David Theo Goldberg, who are co-founders of Haystack, one of the things that they wrote in a book about the future of learning institutions is that we're shifting, in the 21st century, we're shifting from issues of authoritativeness to issues of credibility. So one thing, Bernard, when I was listening to your video for the second badge, I was thinking there's really nothing that you're talking about with a letter grade that's different than a badge. But what badges do in the way that Sunny is talking about is they allow for us to think more about what credibility means. So that begins to build on a lot of the different tools that we're starting to see people use just by matter of course when they're on the internet, whether they're even aware of it. So for example, a badge is just a container, a place to do many different kinds of assessment. What we're starting to see is that what we're really trying to do is to, I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback here, so it's sounding a little bit weird. Can you all hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, Cheryl.
Okay, sorry. Credentials are just what all humans do, is that we want to identify what is good, and so credentials are a shorthand way to do that, and that's starting to build on some of the different tools that we're seeing online, like Sunny was referring to as Stack Overflow around reputation. So that starts to involve all these different kinds of assessment that we don't typically think of because we're used to thinking of assessment in terms of what is authoritative as opposed to what is credible. So by using a badge, we're starting to put the stuff inside the actual credential. So instead of having your grade be separate from the things that you do, now the stuff is inside the badge. You can actually click it and you can see all the stuff there. And that's very different than what a letter grade is, even though they function in much the same way. So if you were to take that, and there's many different kinds of badge systems and many different kinds of assessment, many different kinds of ways of using these credentials, but if you take it to its limit and you really start thinking about what it means to be credible, you actually come up with a credential that's better than what a degree is, in the sense that you can see what's inside it. And what that means is that non-traditional learning institutions can start to say, look at their own organizations and say, what counts? What do we value? What do we want to say to our learners is meaningful to our organization? So instead of having to go to K-12 or go to a university and try and negotiate with them, if you're a professional association, if you have to go to a university and say, we really want computer science students to come out of your program knowing how to do these things. Instead of having to do that, your organization can then say, well, we value these things, so we're going to provide learning content and we're going to make that available as a credential. It's going to have a curricula, it's going to have assessment, it's going to have a credential, and they're going to be able to show with quite a high level of credibility that they were vetted and that we find them credible, we've endorsed them, we've validated all these words that we use to connote trust. You can start doing that in a credential, and it kind of untethers it from some of the very narrow prescribed steps that we have to go through to show that we have skills. And so the thing we're excited about is that badges are really basically about opportunity. Those are the possibilities. The possibilities are that even if you do not go through the prescribed steps for whatever reason, you should be able to show that you have these skills because you can learn them anywhere and any time. So you could say that the possibilities are limitless. And I'll pass it over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Cheryl. That was awesome. I have a couple of quick visuals on this. I wanted to just delve into one of the topics, one of the idea around the relationship between assessment and badges. Here's a little chart. Now you've got the little truck backing up behind you, so just for effect. This is the actually, it's not backing up. It's just hanging out there. This is here's a little, what is it called? A syllogism? I forget what these are called. It's been a while since I did this kind of test here. So what is the relationship between a multiple choice test or a Scantron test like this? An analogy, that's the one I'm looking for. Thank you, Beth. What's the relationship between a test and a diploma or a certificate? Let's put it this way. A test is to a diploma as what is to a badge. Anyone have any thoughts on what that would be? What would you put in that box on the left? Pass the GRE, perhaps? I would put the same thing in, because it doesn't have to be a test, but if the thing on the left is a symbol for that which you do to demonstrate you've achieved something, and the thing on the right is the thing that says you achieved it, then really anything that can go on the left side of a diploma can be on the left side of a badge, right? Let me take this a step further. So, because the badges themselves are not the assessments. They don't, you don't get a badge as an assessment. You get a badge after you've been assessed. And what's really interesting to me is, I mean, yeah, all of these things on the right are examples of things you can get after being assessed. You might call it a credential, a badge, a certificate, a diploma. It might be a license to practice a particular profession, or maybe it's a role or a status, or maybe you've given a new grade level or an indicator that you've kind of moved up to a new level. Those are all equivalent to a badge. But what's really interesting to me is if we're reinventing the notion of recognition, the idea that a badge is now an alternate form of recognition. You don't have to just have a license and just a diploma and just a grade and just a transcript. Now we have a badge which opens up a much wider swath of accomplishments to be recognized. So now you've got this artifact, this badge, that indicates that you have had some form of assessment. Can we reinvent the assessment itself? And I think that's sort of at the heart of your course, Bernard, and why I'm really excited to see you taking a group of people through this and see what we can all learn together. Here's a quick example of some assessment types. Now, you have, and maybe some that are uniquely done through a badge as the form of recognition versus what would have had to have been a grade or a diploma. So you could go back and retroactively give people credit for what they've learned and look for signs that they have been assessed already. You could have experts reviewing, like the Stack Overflow example that Cheryl and Sunny was mentioning. You have peer review possibilities. You've got self-review. You could provide evidence and then claim your credential. Perhaps you're submitting it. The reason Miami is written with a question mark is I think I have an example we can take a look at in a moment. You can have triggers that are embedded into the world that when you cross those thresholds, the only way to have crossed them was to have achieved something. So, for example, if you wind up logging into an online community and making 4 posts that are marked as a like by one of your colleagues, and you did a blog post that was read by more than 100 people, there's some impact potential there, and that might be a trigger for some form of recognition. It goes on and on, though, right? I'll just put them all kind of out there, and this isn't even all of them. This is just an example of how we can break apart the traditional assessment system into all different kinds of triggers, all different kinds of mechanisms for noting achievement. This is where it gets really exciting, because if you can make the argument that a badge can be given for any achievement, then you can make the argument that that there's really an unlimited number of ways to assess accomplishment. So this is where I'm seeing a lot of excitement. Just real quick, a couple of quick examples. The Smithsonian has a program where teachers from across the country can demonstrate their expertise in teaching with Smithsonian resources, and when they do that, they get a badge, which in turn allows them to review work submitted by youth around the world who are learning with Smithsonian resources. So they're badging the badged trainers, who in turn can badge others. You've got organizations who can earn badges based on the connective way in which groups of individuals are interacting with each other and with particular standards. So here's a group called STEPS, the American Association for State and Local History, and you have the ability to earn a badge or a certificate for your museum to say that it meets certain museum standards. And in order to earn it, different people on the team have to do different activities. So collectively, the museum gets a badge while the individuals are doing their part. So these are all possible unique ways of breaking apart the whole assessment universe. Okay, I'll pause there and turn back to Bernard.
I'll just leave it open to the panel for a minute. If Sunny or Cheryl, if you had any follow-up comments, that would be great. Also, I'm noticing some questions starting to emerge. So please, everyone, feel free to pose your questions as they come to mind, and we'll try to field them as we're able.
I don't have anything further to add. I thought I agree with a lot of what Jonathan mentioned.
Very good. So Jennifer posed this question: how can we leverage this external motivator for lifelong learning? If some of you maybe have a sense of where she's going with that and you'd like to pick up on her question, go for it. Or Jennifer, if you want to provide a little more of what you're thinking there, that might be helpful as well.
I think it'd be helpful if Jennifer doesn't mind expounding on that. I feel like she's viewing the digital badge as an external motivator.
That's an interesting question. Maybe you can speak to that if the panel would like to take a shot at that. Some people look at badges and they say, you know, this is really just bringing us back to sort of this behaviorist element where we're sort of giving people a sticker for behaving well or not. Can you speak to that? To what extent are badges really just sort of a new creative digital expression of behaviorism, or to what extent are they something different, maybe verifying or documenting what people are doing apart from the badges?
I can take a shot at that. This is Cheryl. One of the things that I've been doing in the past month is to look at the lessons learned that the Badges for Lifelong Learning grantees shared. There were 30 of them. And I went through systematically and I was trying to surface some of the big takeaways. And one thing that struck me and sticks out across the board is this idea of making sure that the badge is relevant to the user. I think a lot of times when we are designing assessments and designing recognition and trying to make something count, we don't do that. We don't ask the user what actually matters to you. And so a lot of the best designs, the ones that seem to have really thought things through, they went back after they iterated for a while, they went back and realized their users, because this is the stage to really get that kind of feedback, their users or their learners or earners, students, whatever you want to describe them as, they had a lot to say about what they wanted this badge to mean, and often what they wanted was for it to be very rigorous. They wanted it to mean something. It wanted to count. So I think in terms of the lifelong learning piece, that as a broad question, that's a very difficult one to answer, but most people are inside the context of their learning institutions. If you ask your learners what matters, I think that you're going to probably see more of that kind of lifelong learning piece happen, because the whole point of lifelong learning, I like to think, is that there's a tremendous amount of interest in whatever that topic is. So it might be something that has to do with the maker movement. It might have to do with learning more about history or something like that. It could also be that the badge has to be relevant in terms of leading to an internship or to a job or some organization that recognized that whoever gave you this skill is very high quality. So I feel like it is a design, it's actually a design question, and it's also about recognizing that if we are talking about credibility, that is a conversation, that's actually a discussion that you have with your learners and also with organizations that are going to recognize the badge. It's not that you're going to sit in an ivory tower and decide this is how I'm going to make people be better lifelong learners. It's more about what is it that my learners value, and then make the badge designed around that.
I'd love to add to what Cheryl mentioned. I feel like Cheryl's familiar with this already, but we often deal with the question of why did you guys choose the word badge or use that word to do this movement, because badge has a lot of baggage. A lot of people have very strong preconceived notions about of what a badge is, frequently associated with scouting, which makes people think that this is skewed for a younger demographic, frequently for video games, making it feel like it's just simply behavioral stuff, behavioral gamification. I think what we're thinking, when we're stuck with the term badge as for now, you can call it whatever you want, frankly. It's pretty much the way I view it, or the way the Open Badges team views it, it's pretty much anything that captures information. And that information could be skills, whether it's hard skills or soft skills. It could be, interests, motivations, affiliation. It could be of all those things. So I feel like the way we're defining badges is all of the above. And it really depends on your independent organization to work on the content, to create the learning, to create the assessment behind it, and make it a meaningful badge recognition system. We are working with these preconceived notions and historical baggage associated with the word, but at the end of the day, a badge, the way we coin it, is simply something that captures information that has value in one place or another.
And this is Jonathan. I think what you guys are saying is very important, and also what I'm seeing in the chat about like Tyler's comment about the issuer's credibility is very important, and it's not only up to the learner to seek out credible individuals to earn a badge from, but also the person seeking to evaluate the badge holder. And it's a really good point, and something to kind of help illustrate this, if I can find a way of bringing it up. Let me know if you guys can you guys see this? It says let the people curate. Okay, good. I think part of this is that wait good? I think we're good. Okay, let me try again. Hold on. Sorry. We'll get this. I was at a conference a couple of, I guess it was last year, and somebody gave me a badge to put on my conference that I was there to present, but it was also my first time at this conference. And they gave me one of those little newbie, those newbie badges that that get sticks on your conference badge, like where it says presenter, and then you have these other sticker that says newbie. And I know that it was meant in good spirit, because they wanted people to welcome me to the conference. It was my first time, and give me a warm welcome. But I also didn't want to point out that it was a badge for something that indicated I was maybe not as advanced or skilled as others. And so I think it's important, even though an organization might value something, it may not always be valued by the recipient. You have a great match when it's valued by both equally, where the recipient and the issuer are both equally proud of that moment. That's a win-win, literally. But it's not always going to be that way. And if it's not always going to be that way, I think it should always fall to the recipient to decide whether they need to display or keep or store these accomplishments. And just like on a resume, I mean, we don't do this as much anymore because we don't get to curate our resumes the way we used to, because our whole record is out there on the web, and for a lot of people, there's an online resume which it's one size fits all. But when we do paper resumes, we tend to curate and reprioritize and move up and move down depending on the context. And that's one of the great benefits of badges, is we can do the same thing. In fact, what we're starting to find with the sort of acceptance rate around badges, the idea of when somebody receives a badge, are they more likely to show it? It goes right along with what Cheryl and Sunny were saying, which is if people they need to feel like they earned it. If you get a badge that you don't feel like you earned, because you know you didn't, then you're much less likely to show it off. It doesn't say that much about you. However, when EDUCAUSE, I'm on my way out to California right now for the EDUCAUSE conference, they do a series of MOOCs, and they're using digital badges. They issue them through Credly, digital open badges. And the badges that you earn for completing the coursework over a 3 or 4 week course, those get accepted at an upwards of 90% level. The badge you get for, let's say, just signing up for a conference, or doing something that requires a lot less rigor, those are not accepted and shared at such a high rate. So I think you basically have to think to yourself, if you're an issuer, is this going to be perceived as a spadge? And if the answer is yes, it may be that you're not necessarily representing your organization as well as you could. Yeah, those are just a few quick thoughts on badge acceptance. One last thing is I wouldn't minimize the role, though, of badges that indicate that you participated or you were involved. Those can have a lot of great meaning. In fact, I mean, I kind of think of these as the, like, ask me about our chicken wings special badge. I mean, if a server at a restaurant is wearing such a badge, you know they're knowledgeable about that topic. And they may not have taken a high-stakes exam, or if you went to a one-day event for people interested in the medical patient records systems, and you know more than someone who didn't go to that conference, arguably. The fact that you took money and time out of your limited resources to go and do something for a day does suggest a level of interest that's verified. Not to the level of a test or exam, but it should have some value to you. So at the end of the day, the person who earns a badge should be able to decide what has value and where. And I'll turn it back to the group.
Thank you. We have a number. This is a really active group for such a small number. We have an active conversation happening here in text as well. I do want to, there are a couple of questions, and I apologize if I missed some of them, but there are a couple of questions about people who are in more traditional learning organizations, like a K-12 school environment. Oops, sorry about that. We got a little feedback. Some people are asking about a K-12 environment or university. I'm wondering if anyone on the panel could speak to some promising practices about the use of badges in some of those more formal learning organizations.
This is Cheryl. One thing that we're seeing with the Badges for Lifelong Learning grantees is PASA, which is Pathways for oh gosh, I can't believe I can't remember the acronym. They're going to kill me. Pathways for Lifelong Learning, which is in Providence, Rhode Island. They have a very long-standing relationship where they've been building trust for a long time to be able to provide high-quality after-school experiences inside the middle school and high school during electives. So they already had relationships in there, and then now they are badging, and they're doing a lot more to try and connect that learning pathway, not only through school, K-12, but to some local colleges as well. So that's one example of doing it. Some other ways that I think are going to get built on, we're just seeing the very beginning of this with BuzzMath, which is one of our vendors. They offer online math tutorials, which are fantastic. They look beautiful. The sixth grade middle school badge system is aligned to the Common Core standards. So I know middle school now has to teach math with these standards. And so if you have a student who's not learning in your classroom, there's this other option. Maybe the school buys it, or maybe a parent can get it who's trying to figure out how do I get my child to understand these concepts. It's immediate feedback. So you could look and see, well, they're having, I'm just giving this as an example, not trying to say go out and buy it, but just as an example, I think we're going to see more of this where these online vendors are going to start to align things to these Common Core standards, and you'll be able to parachute into a certain standard and learn it and be able to provide that as an alternative way that your student could get better. But I do think that if you're just a teacher and you are trying to do this on a shoestring or to bootstrap it yourself, I think that there's a really great community, and Sunny can talk more about this, the community that's built around open badges. But some of the things that I'm seeing that are really interesting, whether you're in school or you're in university, is figuring out what counts, like what really counts to you. For example, in my program, I was also in a Master's of Information Science program, and we always had to do group work. But nobody ever talked to us about what was valued with collaboration, what was valued with project management or with leadership or doing good presentations or visuals or something like that. Nobody ever went through the thinking. All they did is they went out to employers and found out what employers really cared about, and then came back in and said, you know what, they really want you to have experience doing group work. And everybody knows what group work is like. There's always the person who does more. There's somebody who's very good at writing. There's somebody who's good at presenting and things like that. If somebody were to come to me and say, what do you value, and have me come up with the criteria, I would be so much more invested in that type of learning. And I think you can do that in your classroom, and there's some examples of this online with classroom teachers who went to their students. They had a unit, they might be doing Homer or the Odyssey or something like that, or something in social studies, where they said, we're going to do a badge system, and they actually worked with the students. And you know, if you're teachers, that that's really high-level thinking, to think through the criteria, to think through what it is that you value, to even go through the visual design. You can do all of this paper-based, and then there are a bunch of platforms that are available online where you could, without too much technical expertise, you could learn how to do this so that you can issue them at the classroom level. And then you have a really good case for going to your principal to say, I did this and these were the results. These are how my students performed after I introduced the badge system. I know people, we don't have a whole lot of time, so I just want to throw out there a whole bunch of examples very quickly, and I'll just pass it off to Sunny and Jonathan to finish.
Hey there, it's Jonathan. Just a quick follow-up on that. It's funny, one of the most exciting examples, which is still in progress, but was also one of the earliest examples of the role of badges in a formal learning environment, is the New York City Department of Education. And the very first open badging system that we implemented in 2011, I guess it was with a project called Digit, where students who are under-credited and overage, in other words, they should have graduated high school, but life has intervened and circumstances haven't quite worked out where they have a high school diploma just yet, are learning real-life digital literacy and skills that relate to career and post-secondary options and education. And instead of making them wait 6 months for a single credit, which indicates they have one big set of skills, instead they're getting badges for very discrete, useful skills that not only scaffold their learning while they're in the course, but are marketable, evidence-backed credentials, if you will, micro-credentials, for lack of a better word. Well, maybe there is a better word, badges, that they can balance a spreadsheet using Google Docs, or that they know how to edit a short public service announcement type video, and so forth. And what's really interesting is what started in a digital literacy course has now expanded to over 20 other courses in New York City schools, where they're learning specific areas around humanities and other social sciences, and biology. And where it gets really exciting is now that approach is allowing the New York City schools to connect in a more meaningful way with resources around the city, such as the Hive Network, which is a project which is made possible by Mozilla to connect in traditionally informal learning type institutions, museums, cultural institutions, libraries, historic societies, after-school programs, to the learning that's happening in the classroom. So the badges become this currency that is much easier to allow the skills learned across one's life to be visible in each setting that learner moves into and out of. That's I think that behind the great promise of this movement is when we break down the walls and blur the lines, because that's the kind of learning that we want these youth to grow up embracing, which is that learning that it doesn't matter whether it happens in this classroom or it happens out in the world, as long as it puts you on a path towards discovering what you can contribute in this world and what you enjoy doing, then we're all doing it right.
I think we're pretty close to the hour or at the hour, so I just want to say if anybody is interested in continuing the conversation, the Open Badges team has a community call that takes place every Wednesday. I will go ahead and post the link that will give you information about our next call. It takes place on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. That could be a venue to continue this conversation, so we welcome you to join the community. This is a really, really great opportunity to engage with everybody, and I'm grateful to Bernard for the opportunity.
Wonderful, thank you. I know that we started a little bit later, so I apologize for the time management here. There is the last question, and I know we're at the end of the hour. Sunny just sort of started to address it, but some people are going to wonder, well, what are the next steps? You know, where do we go from here? The badge in this particular course really doesn't take you all the way through the process of how would I actually go about designing a badging system for a given purpose. So one of the things that Sunny just mentioned in that link, that would be a great place to explore. But Cheryl and Jonathan, if you have just a minute, do you have any initial thoughts on maybe great places to start, wonderful communities, where people might want to explore?
I can't say enough about Mozilla's Open Badges community. They are just masters at figuring out how to on-ramp people no matter what stage you're at. The Open Badges Google group, if you don't want to make it or you can't make it at Wednesdays at noon. Haystack also has a lot of resources, but I think in terms of getting started and just being able to ask people questions, there's a lot that you can find online, but there's nothing quite like being able to ask people directly to clarify. I've been active on Open Badges just for me, even just figuring out what some of these terms really actually mean, like baking badges and pushing and pulling badges and signed assertions and hosted, like some of these concepts that once you start trying to write about them or explain them, the thing that's so wonderful about the community is that there are so many people who are coming in who are new, so you're not going to be alone. And often if you are new and you're asking a question, I guarantee you that there's somebody who's been hanging in there for a while who's so grateful that somebody finally asked the question that they've been wondering about. So I point you to the same resources as Sunny, and of course Haystack has a lot of work that's coming out of the Badges for Lifelong Learning. You can find those on our homepage, haystack.org, and there's a big button that says Digital Badges, and that's a great place to start too.
Excellent. And it is quite amazing to see the community that's developing over this. Something I'm fond of thinking about and talking about with people is how often we find ourselves around the table, virtual like this or physically, with groups that we might not have had the occasion to get together with. And that goes within an organization too, at a post-secondary institution or at even in a K-12 environment where you have departments getting together saying, well, now that we've kind of broken down the walls of assessment and what it means to earn credit, maybe we can start to connect our programs in some unique ways. Now that things are a little bit more granular and we're breaking down some of the traditional concepts. So there are some really amazing communities, and in terms of, I guess I would be remiss if I didn't invite you to, since to check out the BadgeOS site, which if you're a WordPress user or interested in blogging, and maybe you have a WordPress site already, there's about 60 million websites in the world. About 20% of the web runs on WordPress, and the BadgeOS system is a free approach to setting up a badging system, and it's what I'm really delighted to see is behind the Beyond Letter Grades course. So you're already experiencing it by being in this program. But what's fun is you can download it, put it on a server, and then begin to really configure what it means to earn a badge. You know, is it by completing steps? Is it by taking submissions or nominations? We also have a whole catalog of add-ons for things like, you know, putting in an activity code so you can give someone a claim code that they can use to earn a badge, maybe in a physical setting. So that would be one great place, and I wanted to double back and thank Cheryl and her organization and Mozilla for the support that both of them have given to BadgeOS and to the community at large. It's a pretty amazing collaboration. And then, of course, feel free to check out Credly if you just want to go try giving a badge and creating one. You can just see what it feels like. It's funny because just the very exercise of filling out the required OBI data, like the criteria and the description and what's the evidence, what seems like a quick process often gets you to be very thoughtful about what it is you value, and you're about to put your name on something. You're going to be the issuer when you do this, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the value. And even though you could go ahead and do a frivolous, silly badge, you're about to send it, and you think, when somebody showcases this badge, it's my name that's on it too. And so while it's very simple and easy to give a badge, whether you're using Credly or any other tool, the hard part is figuring out what gets your name, what gets your identity. So I'll leave it at that. And thanks, Bernard, by the way, for your leadership, not only in this course, but the prior one you did on cheating in online courses was really interesting. And this is a super topic. So keep up the leadership and the great work. Thanks.
Thank you. I could not be more delighted. We have an amazing panel. For those of you who are in this room and participating, I think you may not have realized how amazing of a panel we have, but we have 3 wonderful resources to explore this topic. And so I'm going to stick around for a little while if we want to have a bit of informal conversation. Some of our panelists may have to take off, so I fully understand that. So please take a moment if you want to in the chat area to share a word of thanks with them. Please do so. Also, we're going to continue this conversation within the course. We have the Google community. That's a pretty informal place to converse, and we'll be able to explore this together. I'm also happy to customize and build some resources. My little secret behind building massive open online courses, or even mildly massive open online courses, is that I pick a research topic, something that I'm passionate about. I do research on it for a year or so, and then I create a space called a course where I explore it with others, and I share a little bit of what I've learned, but I invite the expertise of the group in as well, and we leverage what Howard Rheingold and others refer to as peeragogy or paragogy, peer-to-peer learning. And that's really what we're doing here together. So I look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Again, I'll stick around for a little bit, but thanks again to Sunny, Cheryl, and Jonathan for an excellent, stimulating hour.
Bernard, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. It's been fantastic.